In this session of the International Orientation, we're going to go over the most important information, which is understanding your student immigration status. In this session, we're going to go over these important questions and make sure that you can answer them. Those questions are, do you know where your important documents are, and do you know how to understand them? Do you know what is required to stay in status? Do you know what options you have for work as an international student? Do you know what to do when you travel? And do you know what you can do at the end of your degree program? Over the course of these slides, we're going to go over all the information that you will need to answer each of these questions. We will begin with understanding your immigration documents. You have several documents that all verify your immigration status, and each one of them have different details that are important. We're going to go over these documents. I'm going to point out each of the things that you need to look for and those things that you need to be aware of and actions that you might need to take while you're doing your degree program here at the University of Alabama. We will begin with the passport. Your passport is the most important document you hold. And I can't stress this enough. The passport must remain valid at all times while in the U.S. If your passport expires or is lost, you will not be able to leave the United States. You will not be able to renew a driver's license or extend work authorizations. And be aware that even if your passport's still valid, if you are within 6 months of the passport expiration date, you may not be able to re-enter the U.S. after a trip abroad. So it is critical to keep your passport somewhere safe and to make sure to renew more than 6 months in advance of the date of expiration. You can renew your passport or extend your passport through your embassy here in the United States. Now we're going to discuss your visa. Because you spent so long obtaining your visa from the embassy or consulate, you may think that the visa is the most important document, and we understand that. It is a common misconception. Many students believe that the visa controls their ability to stay here in the U.S. I am here to clear up that misunderstanding. Your visa is allowed to expire as long as you're maintaining status and you are pursuing the same objective. So as long as your I-20 or your DS 2019 are valid, you will be allowed to remain in the U.S. and continue to pursue that same objective. For the visa, it only has to be valid at the time that you enter or re-enter the United States. So keep in mind that if the visa expires while you're pursuing your degree program and you're here in the U.S., that has no impact whatsoever on your visa status. All that it means is that the next time that you travel abroad, you may have to renew your visa in order to return to the United States. Now, there are some exceptions about the validity of a visa to re-enter the United States when you're talking about travel to Canada, Mexico, and the adjacent Caribbean islands. This is something called automatic visa revalidation. Another document that is extremely important for you is the Form I-94. The I-94 is your arrival and departure record, and this confirms your official visa status while in the U.S. You can access this online at the website here, i94.cbp.dhs.gov, but you can only access it after you have entered the United States. When you do access it, you'll need to enter in your name, your date of birth, your passport number, and your country of issuance or your country of citizenship. It will then bring up your I-94 record, which should indicate your class of admission, which means the visa status that you were allowed to enter the United States on. This should either reflect F1 student visa status or J1 exchange visitor visa status, which is dependent upon whether or not you entered on an I-20 or a DS 2019. On this document, you will see an area noted that you have an admit until date. That is basically the expiration date for your immigration status. For those that hold an F1 or a J1 visa status, this information should always indicate D/S, which means duration of status. What that means is that you are allowed to remain in the U.S. for as long as you're pursuing your degree and you have a valid I-20 or DS 2019. If your I-94 record says anything different, or if you cannot access your I-94 record, you should schedule an appointment with the International Student and Scholar Services offices right away. Many of you will be familiar with this form, which is the Form I-20. The Form I-20 is the document provided to F1 students, which is the most common student visa type. The I-20 is a 3-page document, and it is divided into sections, which include the SEVIS ID section, the personal and biographical information section, the school information section, the program of study information, which also includes the start date and the program end date. It includes the financial section, which has the estimated cost for study, as well as the source of funding for your study. There is a remarks section, a school attestation section, and a student attestation section. On page 2, you will find an area for travel signatures and work authorizations. When looking at the document, the most important information for you will be the SEVIS ID, which is here at the top left, the program of study information, which will say your degree level, your major, and it will have your program start date and your program end date. The program end date is effectively your F1 expiration date. The I-20 must be extended before this date if you need more time to graduate. For those of you who hold J1 visa status, you will have a Form DS 2019. You will note that it looks very similar to the I-20. The Form DS 2019 is a 2-page document, and it is divided also into sections. The SEVIS ID is here in the top right-hand corner. Over here in section 3, you will have the start date and the end date, and you will have your travel information and travel signature here in the bottom right. Any notation for work authorization would be indicated here. Now we will move on to understanding your student status. As a student visa holder, you have a few key responsibilities. You must study full-time. You must make continuous progress towards your degree. You must never work without authorization from International Student and Scholar Services. You must keep all of your immigration documents up to date and 100% accurate. And you must consult with International Student and Scholar Services before making any changes to your academic program or immigration status. As we discuss maintaining your status, we want to talk about who is involved in your status. There are several government agencies and sub-agencies involved. First is the Department of State. You worked with the Department of State when you actually applied for your visa. So you go through the Bureau of Consular Affairs, which oversees U.S. embassies, consulates, and missions. This is where you applied for and interviewed for your visa, and they issued the visa, which then granted you the permission to travel to the United States. The other major government agency that we work with is DHS, or the Department of Homeland Security. And the Department of Homeland Security oversees several sub-agencies, including the Student Exchange Visitor Program, which maintains all SEVIS records, including F1 and J1 records. You have USCIS, which is U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services. You have CBP, which is Customs and Border Protection. They handle all entry into the United States. So when you went through the port of entry to gain entry to the U.S., you met with a CBP officer. And then you have ICE, which is Immigration and Customs Enforcement. Now, the other folks who are involved in your status are the University of Alabama, primarily through International Student and Scholar Services, who serve as your F1 designated school officials and your J1 responsible officers. And then, of course, the most important person who is involved in your status is you. As an international student, you must pursue a full course of study. For graduate students, the enrollment requirement is that you must enroll in 9 credit hours at a minimum to be considered full-time. Those of you with a 0.5 FTE assistantship, meaning a 20-hour per week graduate assistantship, whether it be a teaching assistantship, research assistantship, or student assistantship, may enroll in 6 credit hours and be considered full-time. For undergraduate students, generally 12 credit hours is the minimum. There are limitations to how many online classes that you may count towards those minimums. For F1 students, the online limits are you can only count 1 3-credit hour course towards your minimum enrollment. You can take more than 1 online class, of course, but all of the additional courses will not be counted towards the minimum enrollment for immigration purposes. For J1 students, the online limits are more restrictive. J1 students may not count any online course towards the minimum enrollment requirement. After a J1 student has enrolled in a full-time course load of in-person courses, they may then enroll in online courses above that minimum full-time requirement. There are, of course, exceptions to the enrollment requirements. There are times when you would be allowed to enroll for less than full-time. For instance, in your last semester of study, students may take only what the program requires to graduate, but at least one class must be in person, so you cannot be online only in your final semester, but you do not have to enroll full-time. You're allowed a reduced course load if you have a medical emergency that's been approved by your doctor and processed and approved by International Student and Scholar Services. And in your initial term of study, you may be able to pursue an academic reduced course load with the recommendation of your academic advisor. For those of you in graduate programs pursuing a master's thesis or a PhD dissertation, once a graduate student reaches candidacy, they may take the minimum research hours as mandated by the graduate school. The final note for an exception to these rules are summer courses. Normally, summer is a break for continuing students who are returning for the fall. Now note, if you are a new student beginning in the summer as a first-time student, you must enroll full-time. Again, summer as first semester is a complete exception. If the summer is your first semester on a new initial I-20 or DS 2019, you must enroll full-time. For undergraduate students, the minimum enrollment requirement for summer as their first semester is 12 credit hours for full summer, or 6 credit hours if they're beginning in summer 2 session. For graduate students who begin their study in the summer as their first semester, the minimum enrollment is 9 credit hours for full summer, or 4.5 credit hours if starting in summer 2. Graduate students who are on a full assistantship, meaning a 0.5 FTE, may be considered full-time with 6 credit hours of registration for the full summer term. Remember, you must have advance permission from ISSS to enroll less than full-time, to apply for off-campus employment, to take a leave of absence, to withdraw from the university, or to transfer your immigration record to another university to begin a different degree program. Violations of status. While we hope this will never happen to anyone, if you were to violate your immigration status, violating those immigration regulations would force ISSS to terminate your status. If your status is terminated due to a violation of status, you will have no grace period and must depart the U.S. immediately. You will lose all employment eligibility immediately. You will not be able to enroll at the University of Alabama for future terms until the issue is resolved. Regaining status is never guaranteed. You may have to travel to regain valid visa status, or you may have to file for reinstatement with Homeland Security. Unfortunately, these are always a challenge and there will always be fees to pay. So, we encourage you at ISSS to get your immigration advice from our office. Friends are not a good source of immigration information. Our team of International Student and Scholar Services advisors have in-depth knowledge about F1 and J1 visa regulations and are best suited to be able to guide you through the advising that you need to resolve any issue. If you have an issue or you think you have an issue, please meet with an ISSS advisor right away. Now, what can cause a violation of status? The most common violations of status result from the following: failing to attend classes and being dropped, not enrolling full-time or dropping below a full-time course load without permission, failing to pay tuition or fees and having your schedule dropped for non-payment, academic suspension, working without authorization, failing to update your address within 10 days of a change, and failing to extend your program before it ends. About updating your address. Again, you must keep your address updated. All non-U.S. citizens residing in the U.S. are required by law to update their address within 10 days of any change of address. When you first come to the U.S., you'll report your address at the point of check-in, and you'll update that information in MyBama. And then in the future, if you move to a new address, whether it's a new dorm room or a new apartment, you should update your address in MyBama, and then ISSS will report that change to the Department of Homeland Security in SEVIS. International Student Scholar Services must have the following information to report to immigration. We must have a local address. This is where you physically live in Tuscaloosa. And we must have a permanent address. This is the address in your home country. Typically, it would be your parents' address. Now, updating your I-20 or DS-2019 is extremely important. Make sure to contact ISSS for a new I-20 or DS-2019 if your major changes or you add a second major, if your level of study changes, if you're moving from a bachelor's degree to a master's degree or master's to a doctorate, if your funding changes, such as you've been awarded new scholarships or assistantships, if your graduation date changes, either you're going to graduate earlier than your I-20 or your DS-2019 end date, or if you need additional time to complete your degree. You can submit an I-20 or DS-2019 update form to ISSS for most of these changes. For those of you who are married or have children and have F2 or J2 dependents with you, we would like to talk about their status. F2 spouses and children and J2 spouses and children have a legal status that is linked to your F1 or your J1 primary status. Their status is valid as long as your F1 or J1 status is valid. For studies, F2s can study part-time at the university level. However, children can enroll full-time at K-12. J2 dependents can study part-time or full-time at university level, while children, of course, can enroll full-time at the K-12 level. F2 dependents are not allowed to work, whereas J2 dependents, if they're of age, can work, but they must apply for work authorization with USCIS. We have information on our website in the dependents section about how J2s can pursue work authorization. For insurance, F2s and J2s do require medical insurance. Dependents can be added to the UA insurance policy. In this section, we're going to discuss student employment. In general, F1 and J1 students may work on campus under the following conditions. You must maintain valid visa status. You may not exceed 20 hours of work per week total during the fall and spring semesters. However, you may work more than 20 hours per week during the summer and official university breaks, such as the winter break and spring break. We do have student employment opportunities listed at the UA Student Jobs website and through Bama Dining. Their websites are listed here. When you do look for employment, be aware that when you visit the UA Student Jobs site, you need to select on-campus jobs only. They also list off-campus opportunities, but that is not an option that international students in F1 and J1 student visa status can pursue. Off-campus employment is only allowed with specific permission from ISSS using the following types of training and work authorizations. F1 Curricular Practical Training, also known as CPT, F1 Optional Practical Training, also known as OPT, J1 Academic Training, and Economic Hardship Authorization. We're going to go over each of these work opportunities individually. For F1 CPT, Curricular Practical Training, it is typically used for internships and practicum experience during the degree program. CPT work authorization comes from International Student Scholar Services and is authorized for a specific period of time, for a specific employer, and a specific location. That means that you must have a job offer in hand before we can authorize CPT work. A student must be in valid F1 status. You must have completed at least one full academic year of study, meaning 2 full semesters. You must have not completed your program of study, meaning you have not graduated. You must have a job offer directly related to your major field of study, not your minor. And you must enroll in an approved co-op course or an academic course that will be tied to your curricular practical training experience. F1 OPT is different. Optional practical training is optional, as its name implies. This is typically used for internships and work after completion of the degree program. The recommendation for OPT comes from International Student and Scholar Services, but the work authorization approval is actually handled by U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, or USCIS, and it is for a specific period of time. In order to be eligible to apply for OPT, you must be in valid F1 status. You must have completed at least 1 full academic year or 2 semesters of full-time study. The work that you're pursuing must directly relate to your major field of study, not the minor. You cannot have already utilized 1 year or more of full-time curricular practical training. You cannot have utilized 12 months of OPT at the current or higher degree level, and you cannot be in an ELI or non-degree program to be eligible for OPT. For J1 students, the type of work authorization that they use is called academic training. J1 academic training is typically used for internships and work either during or after the completion of the degree program. Academic training work authorization comes from International Student and Scholar Services and is for a specific period, for a specific employer, and for a specific location. That means you must have a job offer in hand before we can authorize academic training. In order to be eligible for academic training, the student must be in a valid J1 visa status. The work must be related directly to your major field of study. The training must be an integral part of your study program, and the training must be approved by an academic advisor. The final type of off-campus work authorization is one that's authorized under economic hardship. While we hope this never happens to you, this may be something that you have to pursue at some point. Economic hardship is based off of a severe and unforeseen economic circumstance. Generally, the recommendation for F1 economic hardship comes from International Student and Scholar Services, and the work authorization approval is handled by USCIS and is for a specific period of time. The criteria for economic hardship work authorization, again, is that it's based off of severe and unforeseen economic circumstances. This could be a natural disaster in the home country, a severe devaluation of the home currency, or other events that may have impacted your ability to pay for your living expenses and your study expenses. In order to be eligible to apply, a student must have completed at least one academic year of study. The student must be in good academic standing, and the employment must not interfere with studies. Economic hardship is recommended and approved on a case-by-case basis. Please note, on work authorization, working, paid or unpaid, without proper authorization is a serious violation of your immigration status as an F1 or a J1 student. Even unpaid internships require authorization. Unpaid work is not volunteering. The Department of Labor has a completely different definition of what volunteering is. Most off-campus work authorizations must be approved by USCIS, and that can take months. Always contact International Student and Scholar Services before engaging in any work, or if you have any questions about it, please email us at international@ua.edu or come see an advisor. In this section, we're going to discuss travel. We want to go over the basic information that you need to be able to travel safely and return so that you can continue your studies with the least interruption possible. For those of you who want to travel within the U.S., we hope you will see all the many things that the United States has to offer. When traveling outside of Tuscaloosa, we recommend that you carry the following documents: your passport containing your visa, your original Form I-20 or Form DS-2019, and the Form I-94. Remember to keep photocopies or scans of these documents, including your main passport page, your visa page, your I-94 record, and your I-20 or your DS-2019, as well as any other visa documentation with you at all times, even when you're not traveling. At some point, you may need to travel internationally. Traveling outside of the U.S. has its own special rules and requirements. To depart the U.S., you only need a valid passport. But to re-enter the United States after a short trip abroad of less than 5 months, you will need the following. You will need a travel signature on your I-20 or your DS-2019 that has been signed within the last 12 months. You will need a valid passport that's valid at least 6 months beyond the date of your return, and you will need a valid visa that is unexpired on the date of return. We recommend that you carry a copy of your unofficial transcripts or your enrollment verification letter, both of which can be accessed from the registrar and is available through My Bama in the Student tab. For your travel signature on your I-20 or your DS-2019, you can get that at the International Student and Scholar Services office. Generally, travel signatures are valid for multiple uses over the course of 1 year from the date of signature. In this section, we're going to talk about your grace period and life after graduation at UA. For your grace period, upon completion of your studies, your F1 I-20 or your J1 DS-2019 will end. Even if you have more time remaining on your I-20 or DS 2019 at the time of graduation, International Student and Scholar Services will shorten your record to match your actual date of graduation. Students have an automatic grace period that begins after they complete their program of study. For F1 students, that grace period is 60 days. And for J1 students, that period is 30 days. During your grace period, you have the following options. You can prepare to depart the U.S., and during your 60-day grace period for F1 students or 30-day grace period for J1 students, you can use that time to travel or to visit friends or family who are here in the U.S., or to just simply take care of the business of making the big move home. As an F1 student, you can apply for optional practical training. As a J1 student, you can apply for academic training. Those applications must be complete and submitted before the end of the grace period. You can request a new I-20 or DS 2019 to continue at UA in a new degree program. You can transfer your CVIS record and your I-20 and DS 2019 to a new school to begin a new program. Or you can apply with USCIS to change your status to another visa category. As always, we encourage you to visit us here at International Student and Scholar Services with any questions that you may have. Our hours of operation are Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 4:45 p.m. And you can visit us for walk-in advising or virtual advising Monday through Thursday, 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. Our location is here in 105 B.B. Comer Hall. You can always find us online at international.ua.edu/ISSS. You can email us at international@ua.edu with any questions, or call us during our working hours at 205-348-5402.